Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Hope everybody's having a lovely day on September 20th, 2022. It is my birthday. It is my birthday. I am not live. This is recorded earlier because I wanted to get out and do some things with my wife and dog for my birthday. So we do have good stuff coming up, but wanted to do a quick intro that I recorded, kind of setting the scene for what the stream's going to be about. Thank you so much. A lot of you have already sent me birthday wishes on Facebook and Twitter. I am 36 years young, today. So I kind of feel older than that. If you haven't noticed, I do have quite a few miles on the tires, as they say. In 7 years, I think I've been to about 35 states, and God knows how many cities and towns across the country, in large part thanks to you for funding Status Coup and sending me out on the road. So much appreciation. I try not to get sentimental on my birthday, but you got to be grateful in this fucked up world and country we live in, the United Corporations of America, for every year. And I've had some issues with my back and some other things. So very grateful for what I have, for you, the Status Coup viewers who support us, and some of you who, I consider to be friends of mine too. So thank you. Please smash that like button, share this live stream, even though we're not technically live, get this out to more people. So people will see this. We do appreciate your super chats, particularly on my birthday. I am not beyond shameless begging for super chats for a birthday present, even though it's not going to me personally, would be going to Status Coup, of course. So super chats are welcome. Please smash that like button so we can get this out to as many people as possible. Share this stream. Obviously, there's a lot going on, but I wanted to really focus on something that I think is getting lost. When Biden and Schumer got President Manchin to sign on to the Inflation Reduction Act, i.e. the scaled back, shitty Build Back Better deal, they got Manchin's approval for the bill, obviously by giving a lot of goodies to the fossil fuel industry, obviously by stripping out basically most of the things that were in it that were good in the broader 3.5 trillion deal, through lowering prescription drug prices, even though, as I've shown through speaking with experts like Michael Leidy, the proof will be in the pudding whether prescription drug costs are actually going to go down. And Manchin basically forced through in this Inflation Reduction Act that for every clean and renewable project, you have to match it with another fossil fuel project. Obviously, I've made my thoughts clear on the tax incentives part of this for renewables. I think, throwing tax incentives at the planetary inferno is, let's say, fool's errand. Or if your house is on fire, the equivalent of the fire department showing up with a super soaker. So that's my thoughts on the Inflation Reduction Act. There's some things in it that are good, but it is a half a Band-Aid for a gaping gunshot wound, which is the planetary inferno. But the mainstream media, the corporate media, did not focus on the fact that to get Manchin's vote for the Inflation Reduction Act, Biden and Schumer basically greenlit West Virginia and Virginia to be a sacrifice zone for something called the Mountain Valley Pipeline. For you Status Couers who are OGs, who are with us from the beginning, we covered in 2018, Jen and I went down there, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which is a natural gas pipeline that is going through the steepest slopes in America, the Appalachian Trail. It is really not necessary. There's really no demand for this pipeline. And if and when it explodes, it has a blast radius of 2.5 miles. It would kill a lot of people, really screw up the land, topography, the wildlife, the water, in addition to obviously potentially killing a lot of people that live in that path. So Schumer and Biden basically made a handshake deal with Manchin that if you vote for the Inflation Reduction Act, we will fast track permits for a whole lot of fossil fuel projects, mining projects, including the Mountain Valley Pipeline. This was not discussed in the corporate media. activists on the ground, including environmental justice groups, Black and Indigenous activists in West Virginia and Virginia, and white residents have been fighting for years to block this pipeline, and were successful at blocking this pipeline before Biden and Schumer made this handshake deal with Joe Manchin. Well, now, fortunately, about 70 or 80 congresspeople in Congress, including progressives, are saying they're not going to vote for this bill that would fast track permitting reform, which would expedite approval for the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And boy, is President Manchin not taking it well. Finally, somebody has said no to this fossil fucker dictator. So I spoke with Jonathan Sokolow about 20 minutes ago about this. Jonathan has been one of the activists. He's an attorney in Virginia, and he's been fighting the Mountain Valley Pipeline for years, along with other activists. To get his reaction on Manchin's thoughts and Manchin's crocodile tears that he put forward earlier today in response to this, and to kind of give you more information on this, because I think it's kind of scandalous that Biden and Schumer approved this fast tracking of permits and the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which is literally making people in Appalachia basically a sacrifice zone for when this ticking time bomb goes off. We're going to play that in a minute. As a reminder, please smash that like button, share this live stream. The more people that press like, the more people that press share, the more people that will see this. Super chats are super appreciated, particularly on my birthday. Again, if you're coming late, this is my birthday. Happy birthday! I'm not for super chats for my birthday. It's going to Status Coup, obviously, not just me. But please support us if you can with a super chat. And even better, if you ask me, what do you want for your birthday? Sign up as a Status Coup member. StatusCoup.com/join. You can become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. As far as I know, we're the only independent outlet that actually goes out there on the ground covering environmental genocide, the exploitation and the controlled demolition of the working class, local and state level corruption, water contamination in Flint and elsewhere. We were just on the ground in Jackson, Mississippi. Workers fighting back. We covered the Amazon workers that were fighting in Staten Island for over a year before they won the historic first unionized Amazon. We were on the ground in Buffalo covering the Starbucks workers before they won Starbucks' first unionized coffee house in America, and now over 200 have unionized. We have been covering workers on the picket lines. We were in Iowa last year covering John Deere workers on strike. All of this costs money. So if you can support us, statuscoup.com/join. You can become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Makes a big difference. We'll always appreciate it. Again, thanks for the birthday wishes. Here's my interview with Jonathan Sokolow. Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Delighted to be joined by Jonathan Sokolow, an attorney down in Virginia. And you and many other Virginians and West Virginians have been fighting the Mountain Valley Pipeline for years, which is a natural gas pipeline that has basically been proposed and tried a lot of efforts to ram it through. But you and other activists thus far have successfully blocked it. But Joe Manchin, we learned, along with Chuck Schumer and President Biden, to get Manchin's approval for the scaled back, Build Back Better, whatever they're calling it, the Inflation Reduction Act. Schumer had agreed to basically fast track permitting reform, which would include the Mountain Valley Pipeline. But there is now a progressive bloc in Congress that now that Manchin has approved, and obviously the bill has passed, the Inflation Reduction Act, are saying, no, we're not signing on to fast tracking this permitting reform, which would allow Mountain Valley Pipeline to be expedited. Before we get to any of that, could you kind of explain why you and activists have been so fiercely against the Mountain Valley Pipeline? Because the media didn't even really detail it on a national level that this was going to be snuck in as part of Manchin, Schumer, and Biden's deal.
Sure. Well, and thanks for having me, Jordan. Yes, we've been fighting the Mountain Valley Pipeline for going on 9 years now. It's a partially built proposed pipeline that would start in West Virginia, go through Virginia, and then extending into North Carolina as part of a supplementary project called MVP Southgate. To answer your question, number one, it's a climate change disaster. It would be the equivalent of adding 19 coal-fired power plants and 23 million cars to the road each and every year, creating a huge, making the climate change emergency that we're in even worse. And in addition to that, we don't have to speculate about the damage that the pipeline construction would cause during construction, because it's already caused a lot of damage to water, to resources across West Virginia and Virginia. The pipeline has been fined millions of dollars by the state of Virginia, additional dollars by the state of West Virginia for environmental violations that occurred during construction. And construction is now at a halt. Why is it at a halt? Because these federal permits were issued by the Trump administration in violation of law, and they were thrown out multiple times. Multiple permits were thrown out multiple times by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond because they failed to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act, and they failed to comply with the Clean Water Act and other federal laws that have been protecting us for going on, in some cases, for more than 50 years. So what's happened now is the side deal was reached by Joe Manchin in a desperate attempt to rescue what is in fact a failing project that is billions of dollars over budget, many years behind schedule. They originally said it was going to be completed in 2018. FERC is now, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, has given Mountain Valley till 2026 to finish this project, and it will never be done because it cannot be done in compliance with existing federal law. So what does Joe Manchin do? He drafts a bill, comes to an agreement with the Democratic leadership in at least the Senate, possibly the House, to ram through legislation that would essentially exempt Mountain Valley from all of these laws that they've been violating and get the project approved quickly, get the permits issued. I don't think it's going to happen, and we can talk about a little bit about the process. But the Mountain Valley Pipeline is just one of those projects that should never have left the drawing board. It would go through some pristine water and mountain resources in Appalachia, steep slopes that are dangerous to put pipeline on, karst formations, porous rock, in a landslide, not only a landslide prone area, but an earthquake prone area. So you can imagine putting what is a 42-inch highly pressurized bomb, is in fact what it is, through people's backyards. People aren't going to stand for it. They haven't been standing for it. And that's why we've been doing we're in a strong position to stop this project.
And before we get to Manchin, because he had some interesting words today, I want to show a clip. This was from a few years ago when I was down there covering this. This is me speaking with Red and Minor Terry, because the pipeline, they were trying to ram it through their backyard on Bent Mountain. So a mother and daughter climbed atop their tree for a month to block their tree from getting cut down, which the fossil fuel company needed in terms of construction to go through their property. But they lay it out in really, really alarming terms. If this pipeline was built and went through their backyard, what would happen? Let's take a listen. But one of the commissioners was pointing out they've never seen a pipeline on this scale, in this kind of land, the steep terrain. Also, when you're talking about pipelines going under this kind of land, if there's an explosion, the blast radius could be potentially
2.5 miles.
Everything will be dead in 2.5 miles. And that's all but my son. And if he's visiting, that wipes us out. I mean, my sister-in-laws both live in town, and my brother-in-law's up here, some and some not. So that will wipe out the 7th generation of Terrys, pretty much. 2.5 mile, that's all my friends, all my neighbors, and all my family gone. And the firefighters up here said, Red, there's nothing we can do. It'll take them a while to turn the gas off, so it'll be fueled by the gas. And he said, there's no way we can fight it on this steep terrain.
2.5 miles. 2.5 miles is the blast radius, they were saying. And the Appalachian Trail is some of the steepest slopes in America. None of this was discussed when they were doing the photo op to sign the Inflation Reduction Act. It seems to me that this is basically a sacrifice zone. If Biden, Schumer agreed to this to get Manchin to sign on to the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And Appalachia has been used as a sacrifice zone for hundreds of years. People will not put up with it. It's they use this concept of trade-offs, and they say, well, this was a good trade-off for what we got in the Inflation Reduction Act. Number one, it's factually inaccurate because the Inflation Reduction Act is now law and was in fact a compromise piece of legislation to begin with. So we're done compromising. This is a separate piece of legislation that should be voted up or down or not voted on at all would be the better result. But the idea that people are trade-offs, I mean, the view must be pretty good from Market Street or from Fifth Avenue. But try telling your kids that, we understand that you don't want this 42-inch highly pressurized pipeline going underneath your playground equipment, but sorry, son, you're a trade-off, and we have to do what we have to do. Life doesn't work that way. People react harshly when you try to ruin their lives and ruin their property and ruin their air and ruin their water that we all need to live. And Appalachia, as I said, has been a sacrifice zone for far too long. And it's not the only sacrifice zone. We all know that the data shows that polluting facilities are disproportionately placed in poor communities. Black, brown, and indigenous communities have borne the brunt of these projects for many years. This deal that Joe Manchin wants to put through is going to actually attack all of these communities because its goal and its text is to, in fact, weaken all of the laws that these communities have used for decades to protect themselves from harmful projects. That's why it needs to be stopped.
Absolutely. And I want to show Manchin because after he essentially held everything hostage for the last 2 years to basically, deliver for his donors and enrich himself further, he is now aghast that people are essentially reneging, meaning Congress folks are reneging on the deal Manchin struck with Schumer and Biden. Let's take a listen. Mr. Manchin is not pleased about the congressional bloc that is basically saying, yeah, no, we're not going to vote for this fast track, which would allow the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Here we go.
I got to be honest with you. I've been around for a long time in state politics and federal politics. I've never seen stranger bedfellows than Bernie Sanders and the extreme liberal left siding up with the Republican leadership in the caucus. I've never seen this happen. So it's come to me, what I'm hearing is it's like a revenge politics. And basically revenge towards one person, me. And I'm thinking, this is not about me. This is about something that Bernie has never supported anything about permitting reforms.
I don't know your thoughts on that. He seems to make it about him and his, harmed feelings, but doesn't factor in that there has been, God knows how many activist groups, not just red and minor, but there has been plenty of people that protested in Virginia atop their trees, tree sitters, to stop trees from getting cut down from this pipeline in sweltering heat, in frigid cold. He seems to basically think, this is just, petty politics. Doesn't factor in at all the environmental and or the environmental justice aspect. What were your thoughts on Mr. Manchin's harmed feelings?
Well, his harmed feelings be damned. This is about community involvement and communities defending themselves. Joe Manchin was, in fact, asked about this back on September the 8th. We had a huge rally on Capitol Hill for people from all over the United States, as far away as Alaska and California and Tennessee, people involved in the Line 3 struggle and the Dakota Access Pipe struggle. Many other pipeline and environmental justice fights came to Washington to protest this deal and pointed out that what Joe Manchin is trying to do is trying to weaken community involvement. And he was, in fact, seen on the street by one of our organizers and caught on camera asking about community involvement. Don't you believe in community involvement in talking about these projects? And he turned around and said, community involvement is what has slowed down the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And it's probably the first true thing that Joe Manchin has said since several decades ago. Community involvement has slowed down the Mountain Valley Pipeline, as it should. People should have a say in what goes on in their community. It's pretty simple. And as I said, for Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, these laws are some of the few obstacles or some of the few tools that they have at their disposal to defend themselves against these multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations. Communities should be involved. If somebody's trying to build a pipeline in your backyard, or put a landfill across the street, or put an oil derrick in front of your house, you should have a say. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it to make a profit. And maybe it's good for the community, maybe it's not good for the community, but the community should have a say in what's going on. And what Joe Manchin has done is he's recognized that the Mountain Valley Pipeline cannot survive if there's community involvement. So he's bitten off more than he can chew now. In a desperate attempt to save this failing project, he wants to gut the National Environmental Policy Act, gut the Clean Water Act, make it more difficult to bring challenges under those laws. And he's trying to sell it in a particular insidious way, saying, well, we need permitting reform to clear the way for clean energy projects, as if what this was about. The draft legislation that came out on this side deal, and we're going to see a new draft apparently tomorrow, but the one draft that is circulated was drafted by the American Petroleum Institute. How do we know? Because their watermark API was on every single page of that legislation. So this bill is not about trying to advance clean energy projects. It's about trying to advance fossil fuel projects and throw in a little bit of clean energy to try to fool progressives into supporting it, which they won't. There's close to 80 members of the House of Representatives signed on to a letter circulated by Congressman Grijalva to oppose this side deal, to oppose it being part of a continuing resolution, which is their strategy now. They know it can't pass the House of Representatives with Democratic votes as a standalone bill. So they essentially want to do what Joe Manchin has done, as you mentioned, with the Build Back Better, hold people hostage, say, I'm going to shut down the government. And he, in fact, was asked about a week ago, are you willing to shut down the government over this? And he said yes. He said yes. He's willing to shut down the government to advance the interest of the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which are donors to his political campaign. That's what this is about. Joe Manchin trying to advance the interest of the donor class, trying to advance fossil fuel interests. It's not about trying to advance clean energy projects. There's a bill that Representative Grijalva has introduced called the Environmental Justice for All Act, which does do that, which guarantees community involvement so that the permitting process for clean energy projects can go forward. Because if you rush these reviews, if you cut the community out, what happens? It goes to court and the permits get thrown out. So we're all in favor of clean energy projects having robust community involvement and a permitting process that is fair and inclusive so that those projects can go ahead. But don't try to fool us by passing a bill that's designed and intended to advance the fossil fuel interests and fossil fuel projects and tell us that it's something else. It's not.
Right.
Manchin actually mentioned today, he was asked by a reporter, will your bill include specific provisions to push through the Mountain Valley Pipeline? And he said yes. So he's, in a sense, showing his cards. He's all about advancing the Mountain Valley Pipeline. He knows it can't get through the normal order. So what does he do? He passes a bill or proposes a bill to try to force it through. We're not having it, and we won't have it.
And the other thing that's important to note, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't this all a boondoggle? Like there wasn't really a major need for this pipeline in the first place in terms of electricity needs, energy needs in Virginia? I just recall when I was there that there wasn't really much justification separate from the environmental impacts.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Jordan. The demand has been flat, and there's no demonstrated need for the product from this pipeline. What's happened in this case is, in many cases, is they go to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to get what's called a certificate of public convenience and necessity, and they have to demonstrate a public need. But how do they demonstrate a public need? They use what are called precedent agreements. What is a precedent agreement? It's an agreement between a company and its subsidiary or an affiliated company to purchase the product from the project, in this case, the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And that's exactly what they did there, what they did here. 100% of the product was to be purchased by companies affiliated with the people building the product. So they sign a contract with themselves, they shake hands with themselves and go to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and say, there's our public need. And they bought it because FERC approves these precedent agreements, despite the fact that there's been litigation and a court case, I think, in the DC Circuit that frowns upon the use of these precedent agreements. So that's the demonstrated public need, that a company that has an interest in building this pipeline has agreed with itself to buy its own product. And it's a totally corrupt system because under the rules that FERC operates under, companies that build these projects are guaranteed a 14% return on their investment. This is not from selling the gas. This is from construction. So if you propose a pipeline and you build it, you'll get a 14% return, whether it pumps gas through it or not. And that's what's happened here. So of course they have an incentive to sign these precedent agreements so that they can get their certificate from FERC and move ahead. It's totally corrupt practice, and it's been going on far too long.
Let me read. Bernie responded to Manchin's Crimea River, revenge politics. No, defeating the big oil side deal is not about revenge. It's about whether we will stand with 650 environmental and civil rights organizations who understand that the future of the planet is with renewable energy and energy efficiency, not approving the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Goes on to say the Mountain Valley Pipeline would generate emissions equivalent to 37 coal plants or putting 27 million more cars on the road. It's hard for me to understand why anyone concerned about climate change would consider voting to approve such a dirty and dangerous frack gas pipeline. The big oil side deal requires the president to prioritize 25 energy products for expedited environmental reviews. Of those, 19 could be dirty fossil fuel or mining projects, and 0 are required to be renewable energy projects that would reduce emissions. That is unacceptable, which kind of goes to, listen, it's easy to villainize Manchin, but Biden agreed to this. Schumer agreed to this. They talk a lot about climate change and their bold plan to stop climate change. Most of what they have offered, I think the Inflation Reduction Act with the renewal, the incentives and tax credits, that would have been nice 15 years ago. I don't really know how that's like showing up, your house is on fire and the fire department shows up with a super soaker. It's better than nothing, but you see what's going on with London was on fire over the summer. The heat waves killing 2,000 in Spain and Portugal, obviously devastating storms in Kentucky. It seems that the rhetoric coming from Biden and Democrats is not matching the actual follow through.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It's too little too late. Unfortunately, too many politicians and frankly, most media outlets in this country view these things as from a sports lens. It's a game. It's a sport. It's who's up, who's down. It's not about real people's lives. We're in a climate emergency on this planet, and Mother Nature doesn't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. She doesn't care if you won political points or you lost political points. She doesn't care if it's revenge politics or it's not revenge politics. Mother Nature's going to do what Mother Nature does, and it's just simply inadequate to the task for these politicians to use a talking point and say, well, we've done something. Something is not enough. We are in an emergency. We are in an emergency, and projects like the Mountain Valley Pipeline or Line 3 or Line 5, Dakota Access Pipeline, all these things make the emergency worse. So what's the first rule when you're in a hole and you're digging? Stop digging. You can't dig half foot more and say, well, we slowed down the rate of digging. We're still digging ourselves into a hole, and it's got to stop, and it's got to stop now.
Absolutely. And last question, how do you see this playing out? It looks like there's enough votes to at least block this fast track permitting, but I assume, Manchin and Schumer aren't going to want, Biden and Schumer aren't going to want Manchin going rogue. Who knows, potentially in a close Senate, balking and saying, I'm going over to the Republican side because you didn't follow through on your word. How do you see this playing out in terms of the politics of it? And, if they'll find a way to sneak Mountain Valley Pipeline in, regardless of whether enough Congress people vote this bill down?
Sure. I think this side deal fails, and I think the Mountain Valley Pipeline fails. There's an old saying in politics: when you're winning, call a vote. When you're not winning, keep talking. And what I saw Joe Manchin doing today was a whole lot of talking, mostly at Republicans, trying to convince them to support his bill because he knows the Democrats, at least in the House, are not going to support it. I don't think it has 60 votes in the Senate to get through. The only way it gets through Congress is if Congress is willing to shut down government. Democrats, if they're willing to shut down the government in order to let Joe Manchin get his pet project through and weaken environmental laws. I don't know why they would do that. The Mountain Valley Pipeline was on life support before this deal. It's still on life support. It's missing most of its major federal permits. As I said, it's billions of dollars over budget, years behind schedule. The pipeline is going to fail, and I think this side deal is going to fail. I think Republicans are likely to abandon Joe Manchin on this because they have no great love for him because of, for a lot of reasons. And they're probably eyeing his reelection campaign in 2024 as a possible pickup. Democrats have made it clear in the House, more than a third of the Democratic caucus has made it clear that they're not going to support this. The only way it gets through is if the Democratic leadership decides to split the Democratic Party several weeks before an election and ram this through and tell the progressive wing, and not just the progressive wing, because I think about 15 members of the moderate caucuses in the House signed on to this letter from Chairman Grijalva opposing this deal. So unless the Democratic leadership thinks it's good politics to divide the Democratic Party this close to a key election, I don't think it gets through the House of Representatives, and I don't think it's going to get through the Senate.
Absolutely. And most importantly, putting aside the politics, putting aside for a second Manchin, at the end of the day, I mean, these are real people's lives in the path of this pipeline, from the Terrys to others, that if and when it explodes, people's lives could be put in jeopardy. Property obviously could be damaged or destroyed, not to mention the water, the animal life, the topography. Just putting these pipelines in and the construction changes the earth. So it's very important.
And yes, and as I said, it's not just the pipeline. This side deal that Joe Manchin wants to get through would weaken major environmental laws that have been on the books for decades. The Democrats control the House and the Senate and the presidency. I don't know why they would want to use that set of facts to weaken environmental laws that we fought for, that people died for. Why you would want to weaken environmental laws at this point in our history in the middle of a climate emergency? It just makes no sense at all.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate it for taking the time. Jonathan Sokolow, an attorney in Virginia and activist fighting the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Take care.
Thank you, Jordan.